We're ready to go on to 8F, the discussion about a charter amendment for council to hire its legislative staff. And so I don't know if this is something that Juanetta wants to talk to us about, but we can start this process and while she's discussing that. This is a charter amendment that would go on to the ballot for April the 7th, and it would be giving us the opportunity for council staff to be hired through the city auditor, and we would be able to control the staff and have the staff hired. Eileen, do you want to go ahead?
And I just wanted to note that the questions that came up during the last work session that we had on this matter had to do with Councilmember Knight asked some questions about a direct appointment of the council administrator to city council. And Juanetta drew my attention back to a draft that we had seen earlier this year, back in June when it was postponed originally, that has that provision in it. I do have, it's been in your packets in the past, I do have copies here if that's something that council, if that's a direction that a consensus of council wants to go to talk about that option. So I just wanted to let you know that I do have this here.
Okay, if we went, Councilmember Martin.
That's the one thing I've really thought about on this one. We went with the auditor early on because he was the only employee that we had, and so we sort of tried to make it work to put employees under the auditor. But if we, in a real world where we could actually create from scratch what we want for council in the future, I think employees belong not under the auditor's office, but under our council administrator. And so what it takes to accomplish that, I don't know. You probably have to become a council appointee rather than hired by the auditor, some of those things. But I think it's really important. We have a chance here to actually set things up what we think is the best approach for the future. And I think the auditor doesn't belong in that mix. The auditor's got his own job that he needs to do, so I suggest that. I like that approach.
Okay, Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, I agree with Jan, and I thought that's what we had discussed about 2 weeks ago, and I thought the direction at the end of that was to bring us back the copy that Juanetta had drafted earlier that did have it as a council appointee. So I'm scratching my head wondering why are we still seeing the same draft and not the one we asked for?
I apologize if that was not my understanding of the consensus of council at the end of that meeting, and if I was mistaken, I apologize. I do have handouts here if we'd like to share those around. Again, it's similar to the version that we saw earlier this year. That was the original conversation, and then we had a presentation from Mrs. Kelly and from Mayor Rivera that changed that a little bit. So if that's the direction that we would like to go, I'm certainly prepared to hand these out and we can talk about that.
Let's hand them out. So
Sure.
I think it's a little bit of a different, we put the administrator in a different position when we go this route as opposed to when we go the route of the one that we have in our packet. And so I think that's a discussion that would be worthy of having and how to go about, well, what the differences would be as far as the appointment of a city council administrator. So.
And just to highlight something that we talked about earlier today, with the question that has come up around the classification of the council administrator, should we move in the direction of having the council administrator being a direct appointee? The current classification clearly it's a little awkward for me to talk about it, but the current classification of the council administrator is in the city's professional band. It is subject to the city's policy and procedure manual. It is not at the level that the other appointees are at in terms of being in the manager, senior manager band, and so clearly there may be a compensation difference there. I have talked with the Human Resources Department staff to see if they can get some pricing on that to find out whether or not that would change and reflect on council's budget.
Okay.
I have not gotten that information back from them yet.
Okay. So, Councilmember Knight.
I can appreciate what you're, excuse me, appreciate what you're bringing forward as far as where you would fall in under rights and benefits under the civilian personnel PPM. And I think classifying you under the PPM as or that position as a senior manager at will employee, along with the other appointees, as far as rights and privileges makes sense. But I don't see why that means that your salary has to be in a band that is commensurate with all the other political employees. I mean, we've done the compensation study. We've looked at, the executive branch did a lot of hard work last summer on doing that compensation study, looking at what the bands are appropriate and everywhere else. So I trust that they have the right salary range in there. So I don't know why salary would be an issue, but the rest of the privileges and protections of the appointed position under the rest of the rules of the PPM, having the council administrator fall under the same guidance of the senior manager at will employees, I think would be appropriate.
And that was exactly the question that I posed to Kimberly is would the additional political exposure for the council administrator being direct appointee to council have any sort of compensation impact? I just wanted to make sure that that was the case. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so why don't we, is there, Councilmember Pico?
Well, I appreciate all the arguments about why the council administrator ought to be an independent position, but I'm kind of more of the opinion that hiring everyone under the auditor's office keeps the whole thing somewhat streamlined. I don't feel real strongly about this, but I'd rather see it kept within a streamlined thing rather than growing another department head sort of issue is kind of how I'm looking at it.
If I
I appreciate the arguments the other way.
Councilmember Martin.
I have always felt strongly that the auditor's office needs to almost be at an arm's length. We don't want the auditor engaged in our daily activities. Their job is to actually work to kind of evaluate what's going on. And I think this brings them, from an operational perspective, too close into the daily management of council. That's my opinion. I've always believed auditors need to be at an arm's length and not have those kinds of relationships with the people that they actually sometimes will be auditing things that we're involved in. So
Councilmember Collins.
And I agree with Councilmember Martin and Councilmember Knight. The auditor, to me, from my prior experience, is like an IG, an Inspector General. And I think if you have them hiring employees, it can influence things. I think they need to maintain a separate position.
The question I have about the one that we were talking about, the under 310E, it's the dark language there at the last sentence says the council shall also direct and supervise the city auditor, the city council administrator, and the employees and assistants serving the city auditor and the city council administrator. Do we not supervise the city auditor at this point in time? Is that not what we do?
You do, because there's clear charter authority for you to appoint that position. But if you turn the page, you'll see that I'm using that supervise and direct language because we're specifically calling that council administrator and the auditor out of the mayor's supervisory and direction authority. So I was just using that same language, kind of emphasizing it with the auditor and then pulling the council administrator into that area as well, so that it was clear neither the auditor nor the council administrator would be subject to the mayor's supervision or control.
Okay, so that's not new language, it's not all.
I thought it was fulfilling what council had directed
Right.
me to do.
Right, okay. Councilmember Bennett.
Well, I was comfortable with the city auditor supervising everybody similar to Andy, but after hearing my colleagues and comments about the separation, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think both of these will work. I think the one that, the last one that was just handed out works the best.
Okay. So other comments? Councilmember Snyder?
Yeah, I think last time that we talked about this, I asked if it might be a good idea to run whatever final product we got, which looks like was just final today, but through the folks at the CML to get their tact on staffing and their recommendations on how council needs to supervise or not be able to supervise the staff. There's good reasons for both, but I don't think we've had time to flesh this out yet, especially if it's going to be a charter change.
Okay, so if we did that, we would not do this tomorrow, then I guess we would. There is one thing I like about the one that we just got that I had not realized until I started reading it, the titles, and most of the time, people vote based upon the title that's in the ballot initiative, and the title of the other one is a lot more convoluted. This one is a more straightforward title. I like this. This title seems to be clearer. It just kind of describes what's going on with what council is doing with the auditor and the city council administrator. It's a shorter title and it's a little more direct. So I like this title better than I like the other one. That was one of the things I was going to talk about, and the other one was I was wanting to do the title differently.
Well, let me tell you that in order to set titles, we have to comply with not only the statutory requirements, but with the case law out there. And the case law has said that you have to give the voters a clear idea of what the measure is about, and you should not use summary language if it can be avoided, and you should not use terms of art or catchphrases. And
Right.
so with every proposed ballot title, it is important that you try to fairly tell the voters what it is they're going to do. This is a little more straightforward because it's a much clearer issue. The other one kind of ranges on a number of topics, and in fairness to the voters, they need to know what they're voting on, and so that's why that other one took on a life of its own.
This one is a little, kind of a little convoluted. I'd like you to talk about it. It says, shall be, provide for the appointment of the city council administrator by the city council and for the direction and supervision of the city auditor. Why do you use?
Did I not include the,
Why do
I
we
may have
use
just missed it. Hold on.
the title, the section 3? It's section
Yeah.
3.
Appointment. Direction and supervision of the city auditor, the city council administrator, and their employees and assistants by the city council.
You use, you talk about the appointment of the city council administrator, and then you talk about, and for the direction and supervision of the, wouldn't it be the appointment of the city auditor also, as opposed to direction and supervision of the city auditor?
Well, okay, I'm not sure I quite understand, but in the three amendments that are proposed to the charter,
Right?
we deal with appointment, shall appoint by concurring vote an auditor and a city council administrator. That's new language. So that's why section 3 says, for the appointment of the city council administrator, because that's the change to the charter that you're proposing.
Oh, we already do that for the city auditor, so we don't have to
Yes, it's
say that.
already in the charter.
Got it, okay.
Okay.
All right, got it, okay, understand. All right. So then it goes on to say, and for the direction and supervision of the city auditor, the city council administrator, and their employees and assistants by the city council. So that's showing that we are totally in charge of the auditor, the administrator, all the employees of both departments.
Correct. And that's the change to the charter.
Okay,
So that, we put that in the ballot title.
okay. All right, so this is, Councilmember Collins.
I have another question. As far as appointment, and if this goes on the city charter, can the city administrator, is she totally, as long as she's employed with the city? Or he, in that position for the whole time, or does the council have, can we, at will? Okay,
It's
thank
at
you.
will. It's concurring by a majority vote of the members of the council. So, Councilmember Martin.
Are you at will now? No. Well, we,
Just so you know, that's part of the concern with the salary.
I was just going to say that, I do think that an at-will employee and managing multiple multiple people would put her into a different classification than she was 2 years ago when the salary survey was done. So I think we ought to at least consider that. We certainly don't want that in the charter, but I think we as council should consider that and ask HR to possibly relook at if this was to pass and we were to do this.
And that's exactly what they are working on right now.
Okay.
Is looking at whether that comes back with any sort of a classification or salary change.
Because that'll be, we'll have to, will that be, do we disclose a financial or fiscal statement with these when we don't have to disclose that? Okay. Okay, so that's a good discussion, and so I guess we will, is there any further discussion about Councilmember Snyder?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we need this in the charter, but for instance, paragraph 310E, when it, two-thirds of the way down, talks about council shall also direct and supervise the city honor. I think that we need to understand what we mean by direct. It was mentioned someplace else here, it takes a majority, fine. But one of the complications that we're probably going to hear from the folks at the CML is council directing the staff under them when it's may not be a legal direction, and that person may be put in a very tough spot. I think that we need to work through that and think through it and figure out exactly what we mean when we use the word direct, that we might want to use language by a majority of 5, 6, I don't know, but it's, this is not the way most of the governments work around the state. Most of them have the city manager that kind of insulates and provides for that, and we're doing something there's not a whole lot of precedence for. So,
This would be more akin to what is done at the legislature, where whenever the leadership changes, they take over and they have a committee that does that, but they take over the leadership and direct the employees. So, Councilmember
Yeah,
Warren.
I'm wondering if, we certainly don't want all this in the charter, but if we couldn't in council rules identify some of the ways that we would actually work with them as a possibility to clarify some of the,
I'm not sure it would fit in the council rules because
Okay.
those rules of procedure to get you through these meetings, but it
Okay.
may be another document.
okay.
So that's a fair conversation to have, and I think within our office, we should talk with our employment attorneys.
Okay.
And see what they would recommend.
Great. And CML does have some ideas on this. I know I've talked to them, so.
Okay,
President, if I could add one item on this.
Sure.
If that's possible. Just one comment from the mayor he wanted me to share. Just as we consider charter amendments, his recommendation still is that we, council, work with the mayor's office on a comprehensive charter review, not just for this amendment, but for others that would involve citizens, among others, to really look at a holistic approach to charter amendments. So, thanks.
okay. Okay, any further discussion on this one? So, okay, let's go on to,
Just-
wait,
I just want to be clear on what the direction is. This does appear on tomorrow's agenda, and if there's a chance that we might consider postponing, it would probably be good to talk about that, or whether
wait.
we intend to move forward with this tomorrow.
Okay, I think if we want CML to look at it, then I think we have to postpone it if that's the, Councilmember Collins.
And working with the executive branch like it was just requested, I think we should all look at it because it, I don't know, it kind of goes in a couple different directions, excuse me, and to me, doesn't meet the single subject rule that's always being proposed on the title board.
Okay, so I think we are going to, go ahead, Councilmember.
I thought Eileen was going to list what she thought that we told her, and I was going to ask you to say again what you think we told you.
Well, that's a good question. It sounds to me as if your direction is to include the version of the ordinance that has the city council administrator as a direct appointee of council, and that it would come up tomorrow in our regular meeting, but I thought I heard that there was some discussion about postponing that conversation into January. So what I'm hearing from you is that I will plan to put this on the work session agenda in the first meeting in January.
Right. Councilmember Bennett.
And I also heard passing this by CML for additional information.
Yes, yep, I have that.
Okay, so that's what we will postpone it tomorrow until the first meeting in January.
Okay.
So